ready to talk hockey. Streaming from the Oilers Live Studio. Subscribe or follow today.
Hey, it's Michael here for another Tuesday edition of Oilers Live. Got as my guest tonight, Dash from the Straight Off the Pipe podcast. We're going to be doing a little season in review, starting from when the Stanley Cup was awarded to Tampa Bay July 7th of this year. So we're going to kind of look back and see what happened with the Oilers, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of that fun stuff. I want to start by saying tonight's episode is brought to you with the help of Bet99. Use Heavy Hockey in that registration code, and you're going to get a $600 matching bonus. So that's better than if you go to Bet99 on your own. We'll get you $600 on the matching. And while you're at it, make sure you go and visit heavyhockey.com. A couple of good articles out there. Spencer Pomodi just put one out about the Oilers prospects in the World Juniors going on right now. And if you aren't on YouTube, you go to youtube.com or youtube.ca/heavyhockey. And I want you to smash like on this video and then hit the subscribe button. We need all the subscribers we can get, and would love to see you on there, commenting, giving us some feedback, good or bad. Although I don't always love the bad. Sometimes, man, these Twitter guys can be awful nasty on occasion, but it's all in good fun. All right, so we are going to do the Oilers season so far in review, at least from the start of when the Stanley Cup was awarded. Lots has happened, and we're going to talk about that tonight. First, I want to say hi, Dash. Welcome.
Hi, my handsome Haligonian hunk. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Love the shirt. Princeton Hockey. I didn't see that until now. Sweet.
Gift from the in-laws for Christmas.
Nice.
Thank
I was
you
just
very
about
much.
to ask. Yeah. Actually, I'm wearing a nice little Adidas jacket gift as well. So that's good. Christmas was good. Merry Christmas to everybody, and closing in on the new year. This is the last episode of 2021 for Heavy Hockey and the Oilers Live podcast, and we're going to start 2022 shortly. So let's start with the season in review so far. So currently the Oilers are sitting in the last wildcard spot with 36 points, 29 games, and a game in hand on both the Jets and the Kings, and a few points ahead. So they're firmly in that last wildcard spot. And doing all right. If you go by points percentage, they're right in the mix. So that's not too bad. They did, of course, just come off of winning 2 before the COVID shutdown. But prior to that was 6 straight losses in a row. Was a dark and dire time for the Oilers apocalyptic crew. And a lot of people were jumping off the boat. In fact, a jersey even came on the ice, which is a little bit sort of old news now. And
It belonged to a guy from Hamilton.
That's exactly my thought. Who knows who it was? Anyway, you know what? That's where we're at. So this kind of season starts, I think, as soon as the Stanley Cup's awarded, so July 7th. And when we look back at the Oilers so far, and you go back to, it wasn't long, it was 5 days after the Stanley Cup was awarded that probably the biggest move, or one of the biggest moves for this Oilers franchise was made, which was the Edmonton Oilers acquired Duncan Keith and Tim Soderlund, more or less no-name players playing in the, actually he's been called up to Bakersfield. He's played a few games there for none other than Caleb Jones, who I think the Chicago Blackhawks acquired really because they were into having the Jones brothers on the team, and Duncan Keith, from all
Novel
accounts,
idea.
Yeah, and from all accounts, Duncan Keith was asking for a trade. Now, we'll get into that, and we'll talk about what all that means. Oilers also, for future considerations, a.k.a. nothing, traded away Dylan Wells, who was no more than really a backup goalie in the AHL. Really not doing much, and I think is spending time backing up in the AHL for Carolina. And then the expansion draft happened, of course, and the Oilers lost Adam Larson. So we're just going to do a little bit of the season review. The expansion draft shortly after was some signings, and then the draft. Oilers, of course, were just a day prior to the expansion or the entry draft. Agreed on terms to a 2-year, $4.4 million salary with none other than Mike Smith. Now, going into the draft, and again, we're going to talk about what this all means, but the Oilers had a first round pick, and they had no second round pick. They picked 22nd. They picked 90th. On the first round pick, they picked Xavier Burgo, who's currently, I think he was out tonight in the Canadian game, but he's a decent prospect leading the queue. I've had a chance to watch him play live. Hell of a player, really skilled, good on and off the puck. And then going down to the third round, they took Luca Munzenberger, who is the German player who is also playing in the World Juniors. Scored the only goal for Germany in their first round and won German Player of the Game. Down that, they've got Jake Chason, who was a fourth-round pick. And then a guy that probably should be on the Russian team, except for the fact that they rarely take CHL players on their World Junior team for whatever reason. But
kids under 19.
Yeah, his name's Matt Vay Petrov, and he is just lighting it up in the OHL right now. He's doing really, really good things there. And then again in sixth down, Shane Lachance, and then Maximus Weiner. And so a couple of actually really good picks in that draft: Xavier Burgo, Munzenberger, and Petrov. 3 good picks there. So that was what happened early on. That all happened in the month of July, which was pretty good. In fact, July kind of ended as well with a bang. Oilers, not long after the entry draft, they signed Zach Hyman for a 7-year, $38.5 million contract. And then they signed Tyson Barrie for a 3-year, $13.5. Went on again in trying to, of course, bring in some youth. Signed Cody Ceci for that, of course, is sarcasm, for a 4-year, $13 million contract, and Derek Ryan for a 2-year, $2.5 million contract. Busy day nearing the end of July. They also sent Ethan Bear. Sorry, early on I was talking about the Blackhawks. Dylan Wells was traded to the Hurricanes, and the Blackhawks, of course, was where we got Duncan Keith from. But then the Hurricanes and the Oilers again made another trade. This is probably a bigger one. Warren Fogle, good third liner for the Hurricanes, came over in exchange for Ethan Bear, which of course had a lot of controversy. Fogle then turned around to sign a 3-year deal along with Nurse, Perlini, Skinner, Benson, Cuckoo. Tullio signs an entry-level deal. Marodi signs a 2-way contract. Sevier, Yamamoto. This is all the summer moves. And then we got Yamamoto signs a 1-year, $1.175 million contract with the Oilers, all prior to season start. And then we enter the 2021-2022 NHL season. Of course, the Oilers started off on a tear, going their first 10, was it 9-1 in their first 10? Absolutely great with the starting game beating Vancouver and then beating Calgary, so that was good. I would say they, in October they looked really good, top of the standings, along with Florida and Carolina, right into the middle of November. They enter into a 4-game road trip, which was maybe the first kink in their armor, right? They lose to Buffalo, lose to Detroit, and then just eke one out against St. Louis, going 2-2. That was kind of the first time we saw anything resembling something of maybe a team that wasn't. Yeah, exactly. and in that,
that was the first game that Koskinen won us an actual game.
Exactly.
It was that Blues game.
And then, so they make it out of October or November, I think, really good. December becomes, with a road loss to Seattle, really is the area that, in fact, that was their second loss in a row, but that was the one that kind of kicked off what would be a 6-game losing streak. Oddly as it is, though, it was the Oilers end up beating Seattle as part of their more recent 2-game winning streak. And that's where we end off. And so that's kind of from when the Stanley Cup was first hoisted by Tampa until now. I'd say lots has happened. Some good, some bad.
Do you like roller coasters?
Yeah. This is... We've got Eric Friesen joining us on Facebook tonight, and already he says Fogle has looked good on McDavid's wing. Oh, I should point out there is one more piece to this. Of course, the Oilers are back on the saddle. I've been watching a little bit of Yellowstone over the break, and the Oilers are back on the saddle. They've got the practice lines as tweeted out by Bob Stauffer. We got Fogle, McDavid, and Hyman running top line. RNH, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto. On the second line, Shore, Ryan, and Xavier. Third line, Benson, McLeod, and Turris. On the fourth line, Perlini sitting on the spare. And then Cuckoo and Barry, Broberg and Bouchard, Samorukov, and Ceci. With Nurse out on COVID protocol, I believe. And then Smith is back in, and Koskinen and Skinner still there. And then, of course, big news just yesterday is the taxi squads are back in the NHL. So that's a lot to say in one breath. And you're right, a bit of a roller coaster. Tons happening for this team. Let's start first. If you could think of probably the best move the Oilers have done since July 7th of this year, whether it's draft, anything, what's the one thing that comes to mind first? It's like word association.
Zach Hyman.
Yeah. I think, that's the first thing that came to my mind when I thought of asking you this. Zach Hyman obviously is the biggest signing the Oilers have done for a little while. Well, the Nurse signing, that was pretty big too. Where does that, that's a good thing. Where does that match up for you to signing Nurse long term?
In what way do you mean, Michael?
Like
does it match up?
Yeah, I mean, and does this, when you think of this team, what's more important to you? Was the Nurse signing more important or the Zach Hyman signing?
The Nurse signing. Nurse is he's just too unique in what he does for this team, and his 5-on-5 play is phenomenal. He plays against the toughest competitions night in, night out. He barely gets much power play time. He plays almost every penalty kill. He's our toughest player. He's our meanest player. He's our most offensively reliable player. That's not taking anything away from Zach Hyman. I don't think.
No, and I don't think it has to. But
you asked me, and I think that's just because of his unique intangibles and what he brings. Not that Zach Hyman doesn't bring a bunch of unique intangibles, and that he isn't important in a whole bunch of other ways, including 5-on-5 play and penalty kill and whatnot. But we have a strong wing core. Whereas I guess the reason I lean towards Nurse is because from the start of the season, I guess from the time he signed Keith, I've hated our second and third pairing. So that's why Nurse became so important, in my opinion, relatively speaking to Hyman.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you're speaking in relation to the Hyman signing, for sure, 100%. I think Nurse is so important. yeah, 100% agree with you. He brings something that not many players on this team bring. Plus, he solidifies that back end. There's not many guys that can play as many minutes as him and look like he still has enough energy to play, 3 more periods of hockey, right? Like he just, he's out there. He gives it his all. What did he play that one game in the? How many minutes?
63 or 64 minutes or something.
And he looked like he could have kept going for another 60 or so. Like his stamina is unbelievable, and he plays hard, right? Like
those are tough minutes too.
Yeah. He's not giving anything away when he's out there for
4 to 6 minutes a night on the penalty kill. That's against the Sidney Crosbys and the Nathan McKinnons. And
now a lot of Oilers fans been yelling to get Nurse on the power play. But I mean, how much more could you actually put this guy? Down?
He'd be fine there. You just can't afford the ice time for him. Then you're just completely wasting Barry because that's all he's good for.
Yeah. And so let's talk about some of the acquisitions the Oilers have made. Obviously, Hyman is a big one. 7 years. I guess let's stick on that one first. 7 years for Hyman too long? Was it too much for him, or is it worth it? Or is it maybe the only correct answer here is that's the only way he signed with Edmonton?
And that's the answer, and it is, and that's what it all comes down to. Is it too many? Yeah, probably. I mean, he plays a tough game. We're seeing it already that he's banged up. He was banged up in a little bit in Toronto too. So if he's just that type of player that plays 65 to 75 games a year, then it is what it is. If his play diminishes because of that over that 5 to 6 year span, well, then maybe his years 6 and 7 aren't as favorable anymore. But I think right now, I think of two things there. One, Ken Holland straight up said that I have to use term as a currency. He doesn't have cap space, and that's all he could use. He could just give guys more years. Almost knowing full well that, if he's not here in 6 years, which, I mean, I don't know how long Ken Holland wants to do this for, he's probably putting somebody in a tough spot in that 6 year span. I think he, as a result, and, it's a trickle down, right? Pete Chiarelli put him in and handcuffed him and put him in a tough spot as far as our cap situation. And because of that cap situation, Ken Holland had his hands tied. And because he had hands tied, I'm not sure he used the cap space he did very auspiciously, but when his hands were tied, he still went out and did what he needed to do. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all folds out now.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Look, fans got to realize one thing, right? Like, you can't say you want it now and then not make some sacrifices for later, right? Like, it's, that's what that term is all about, right? If that term is Ken Holland saying we're going for it, maybe not this year, maybe it's next year, but a lot of fans are screaming it's got to be this year or next, right? And
I think he's building for next year. Yeah, I just think the cards he was dealt with the goaltending, he wanted Markstrom, he wanted Grubauer. It didn't work out for him. Clear signs he was looking for goaltending. He didn't overextend, which was great. He just went and got Smith back again, and he's got to ride out Koskinen because nobody wanted that contract. So, these are the goaltenders he has. We step away from a little bit more of cap space with Lucic and Sekera, and we can hopefully be in a bit of a better position again next year, right? And if we can do something with the goaltending and a little bit of help on the defense and maybe a help at center, I think we can easily make a run. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at this trade deadline, because maybe that's where one of those
we'll get there. We'll get to that point. Okay, so before we even get through the transactions, I mean, we said that's the Hyman's kind of like the best thing that happened to the Oilers. Obviously, Nurse was already in the fold, so whether the contract maybe in relation to Hyman's the better of the two things. But what in your mind?
Let me ask. Hold that question. Okay, go ahead. No. Oh yeah, let's fight it out here.
Yeah. What's the worst thing? What's the worst thing that Ken Holland since July 7th?
Do you really need to ask me that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know the answer, but I know your answer. Yeah,
You know
yeah.
my answer. I think most people do if they listen to me. Signing Duncan Keith was, I think, the start of something bad. Um, this was the first time that we had a
Now,
good chunk of
by the
caps.
way, you hold by that, right? Like this is, I mean, you've seen Duncan Keith now play, and
Absolutely.
you're holding by this.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
okay.
for sure, whether he's played well, decent, average, whatever, I don't think anybody thinks he's played spectacular. I don't think anybody thinks he's played terrible. So if he's in that range somewhere, he still doesn't live up to his $4.5 million, $5.5 million that he makes, or whatever the hell it is. So, not to mention we had to give up Jones. Not to mention there was just better use of that money. We knew as a franchise, we knew as fans, he knew as a GM that we needed to do something goaltending wise. Now, great, he didn't go and overextend for somebody that was not better than Smith or Koskinen and have to spend too much for it, right? Like you get a goalie out of Columbus or something, and that doesn't work out. But the Duncan Keith thing stumped me because that was his sign right there that it's win now. That was, and whether Dave Tippett or Connor McDavid or, his time with him at college convinced him that he was going to be the greatest Oiler of all time. Somebody put that in Holland's head between the three of them. And for whatever reason, he thought it was worth that full salary to do so. And so, no, he's not living up to that salary. He's still, he's okay behind the hash marks. I think he's okay in front of the net. But he's not great at breaking up cycles. He's not great at closing gaps. He still makes bad decisions when it comes to edge work and guys that can use speed to get around them. And it's scary because of the fact that we also have Barry that does that, and we also have Russell that does that, and it was more of the same. And what scares me in this win now scenario is, alluding to what we said earlier, in Holland, screwing the GM of 6 years from now, he's got to win next year or the year after, because it starts to deteriorate again. He kind of only gave himself a 2 to 3 year window. So,
well, Duncan Keith's off the books right after next year.
After next year, yeah, sure,
yeah.
Unless he retires, which maybe that was the whole thing. Get to Canada, retire after this year, Kenny, and don't tell anybody about it. And I'll go coach my kid. And then that salary goes back onto Chicago, and we don't have it on our book. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe
there's a lot of whispers in the wind, right? That, know, and you talked about it, that it was McDavid fighting for Duncan Keith, right? After, obviously, they were talking about the series that they played them, how hard it was to play against Duncan Keith. He's clearly right. He's got the pedigree there. There's no doubt there. But yeah, you're right, 100%. At $5 million, you're talking about leaving the potentially the next GM with a couple of years of Zach Hyman at however many million, right? I mean, that's the same thing. We're getting that extra couple of years of Duncan Keith at the $5 million that. They were expecting would be a drop off.
It's the opportunity cost, though. Like, you could have just spent that money in so many better ways. And so, yeah, for me, it's my bad is Duncan Keith. I think he's not living up to his money. He's not living up to his salary. In fact, he did some questionable things at the beginning of the year that kind of didn't really lead up to his leadership intangibles either. So, I don't know. I just think that far and away, there's a few others on my list, but far and away, that's been the worst one for me.
Yeah. Okay. I don't disagree. I'm not maybe as down on Duncan Keith as you are, and maybe you aren't that down on him. But I agree. The deal itself was bad. I think getting Duncan Keith is not so bad. And you know what? I like Caleb Jones. Had him on the podcast. Had his mom on the podcast.
Yeah.
All good. Right? Great people, whatever, right? But you know what? I could care less about where Caleb Jones ends up playing hockey, right? Like, in terms of the Oilers. Even this year he's been injured, obviously, but he hasn't proven himself to be a full timer on Chicago either, right? And that team, like right now anybody could be a full-timer there, right? Like they're just not performing, right? So I don't know what that says about him, but he just hasn't proven it. Here's the list of in Ken Holland's reign as GM. Here's the list of acquisitions by way of trade. James Neal, conditional 6th-round pick for John Marino. Angus Redmond, Tyler Ennis, Mike Green, Athanasiou, Ryan Kuffner, Tim Soderlund, Duncan Keith. Future considerations, nothing. And Warren Fogle.
Jeez.
So,
that sounds even worse than I thought.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. You know what? I like Ken Holland, but if you are if you're defending him based on his ability to make a solid trade for this team, I mean, you might be in trouble. I mean, that's a hard argument to make. I mean, if you go through that list of acquisitions, Neal's gone, Redmond, I will never see him. That's a nothing trade. Tyler Ennis, right? We know where that turned out. Mike Green, right? We know how that turned out. Athanasiou, we know how that turned out. Ryan Kuffner's nobody. Tim Soderlund's nobody. In terms of, I shouldn't say nobody, but in terms of making the NHL. We've got Warren Fogle and Duncan Keith are the two names that are currently on a team that have made this year. Those are trades, right? I mean, he's made some signings. He's done some other things, obviously, Hyman. But we got rid of Lucic, who, I don't know. Look, I didn't like Lucic any more than anybody, right? The guy was doomed to fail, kind of like, Larson might have been doomed to fail in Edmonton because of who he was traded for, right? But Lucic was doomed to fail because of his contract, right? Like in terms of in the fans' eyes, that really didn't work out for us. It's worked out just fine for the Flames. I hate to say it. Yeah. Whether he's a boat anchor or not on a line like McDavid's, he's certainly providing some leadership to the Flames, as well as getting some points on the. I can't. If I was a goalie, I would just put my stick down in front of my 5-hole and wait for him to shoot it, because that seems to be the only place he's scoring this year. But anyway, I don't want to talk about Lucic because I'm done down that road. But anyway, if you're going to talk about Ken Holland and his trade criteria, he hasn't done a great job for the Oilers. James S. is listening in on YouTube. Thanks, James. He says, if bringing in a 3-time Cup winner, 1-time Conn Smythe winner is the worst thing he did, we have an awesome GM. I don't disagree we have a good GM. I'm not going to say awesome because I think there are, he's probably middle of the road. He's not the worst I've seen for this franchise. But
I just hate that narrative. Yeah. Like, what is are we supposed to sign Claude Lemieux too?
Yeah.
hey, well, what? He won a Conn Smythe and Stanley Cups and a gold medal. Look at all that. Like, if you're not good, you're not good. You have to be good at hockey.
Who would you like to see GM this team if you had your option? This doesn't matter. But anyway,
Brad McCrimmon.
Jim Rutherford's the guy.
McCrimmon.
Yeah. I don't know if McCrimmon is the guy that I would pick, but Jim Rutherford, 100% wheel deal. Like, that's what this franchise needed. Anyway, you know what? Ken Holland's is not 100% of the problem, but he's certainly part of the team that makes up this team. So Duncan Keith, we agree that's probably the worst thing. Is James on to something though? I mean, if that's the worst thing, if that's the thing that we have the most to complain about, like, is that all right? Is that
love you, James? But no, I disagree. That's okay. And come at me, bro. I just feel like, no, it's terrible. Like, what do you want, a fourth line with Claude Lemieux, Mark Messier, and Joe Sakic?
Yeah, well, Duncan Keith's not. I mean, there's a bit of a straw man there. I mean, Duncan Keith is not that far over the hill, right? Like, he's played reasonably good in a second line defensive position and filled in reasonably all right when he needed to. Right? I wouldn't go that far. You think he's that bad?
I think against top competition, he has not been that good at all. I think when we played soft teams and he gets 18 minutes, yeah, he's okay. And he's just okay. I don't know. I think Duncan Keith, like, he was exposed in that 6-game losing streak, the games he played. And I think that's the type of defenseman that when you're down the stretch at the end of the year, or you're in a playoff race, that you can't march him out against who are the best second lines in the league.
Well,
you
so
can't march him out against those guys. Like,
so first off, you've got Nurse there playing 30 minutes, right, a night.
Sure. So
right?
he takes on the first.
He takes on a fair bit. First down a little bit more.
He's got Wheeler, Scheifele, and Ehlers, and
you got Cece, who's I think shown better than we expected from him.
Right. So that leaves Keith solid. And Cece to take on the Pierre-Luc Dubois and like the other 30 goal scorers on his wings, and they'll get exposed, and they're not.
So I mean, a lot of people are going to argue with you, and I think
okay.
whether you agree or not. I mean, there are some intangibles to having a guy like Keith on your team, right? Like what
has changed on our team that Duncan Keith has promoted that change? Like what have you seen that has been like, wow, what a glaring change that Duncan Keith?
Well, I don't know that we can 100% know for sure, right?
I guess that's true.
I mean, we're 30 games in, and it's been a damn weird year, to say the least, right? Everybody got injured at the same time, and not all from COVID, surprisingly enough, right?
Yeah,
which might be worse.
I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm not saying everything he's done is bad. I'm just saying it's not worth the signing. He's not worth the money. He's not worth the intangibles. He's not worth giving up Caleb Jones. Like, wouldn't it have been a real neat idea for Ken Holland to use Caleb Jones as bait and get Seth Jones into Edmonton if he wanted to play with his brother? Like,
yeah, I mean, Seth Jones is a whole other ball of wax. Let me tell you, I don't. At one point I would have been on board with the Seth Jones thing, but I've listened to the analytics folks.
He hasn't had a great year.
Yeah, and he, you know what, this is a time when the analytics guys knew, right? Like they were saying he's the wrong guy to lead your team to the promised land, and he certainly hasn't shown to be, hasn't done much for Chicago to get them. In fact, listen to any NHL year in review so far. Yeah, NHL year in review, and probably the big surprise for a lot of folks is they thought Chicago would be way better than sucking the up the back of the league. Only team they're better than is Arizona. Durst is listening in on Facebook. He says a good GM wins a cup, an awesome GM wins multiple. Can't disagree with that. Yep. Keith got hurt November 23rd, so he was out for most of the losing streak. That is true. Yep. And he also says you can't have Nurse and Seth Jones both on this team, and I know who I'd rather have 100%. But I don't think Seth Jones was in play. I mean, you know what? Anytime somebody's in play, Oilers media or somebody, the Oilers, like, you could say any team is. If Seth Jones is on the market, you'd be stupid as a GM not to call up and say, "Well, do I got anything for you?" Right? Like, I mean, so and that call alone is to say, "Well, I know, that's enough for Friedman to get on, 31 Thoughts, or is it 32 Thoughts now? I don't know if it is yet." But anyway, it's 32 Thoughts and say the Oilers, the Oilers are inquiring about Seth Jones. So I don't, but I
all
but
fair
I don't
points. I know we can't have another $9.5 million defenseman. I know that we couldn't have. I get all that. I meant it facetiously, like pie in the sky. Like, if that's what Chicago and the entire world knew that that's what they were going to do, why did Holland have to give him everything? You pay the full salary and give him Caleb Jones. Like, that's both of the things Chicago wanted. Like, I just feel like we had all the leverage and gave it all away in spades. And
well, his trade history with Edmonton is shit, right? Like, let's be Let's be honest, right? And in fact, he
wasn't great at the end of his Detroit run either, man.
No, you could go through his whole trade history, and he hasn't done. He's not a trade. He's not okay. So I said I'd like to see Jim Rutherford. Jim Rutherford's a guy that wheels and deals, right? He makes trades, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to agree with about 70% of them, right?
Good.
But that 70% is what's going to get you at least to the second round, right?
Yeah.
Ken Holland manages a team, right? He makes signings. He puts a team around, puts a team together. He uses draft picks. He develops it, right? But I mean, if you go back through his trade history, I mean, you got to go back a long ways before he even made a big trade, right? In fact, I'm looking at it right now. The last big trade that Ken Holland made was a salary piece, which actually ended up in the Coyotes acquiring first-round pick that ended up being Jacob Chychrun, and it was Pavel Datsyuk to the Coyotes, right, for Joe Vitale, and first-round pick who ended up being Dennis Cholowski, who hasn't really played, and a second-round pick. So that gives you, that's the biggest trade since, and that was done in June of 2016.
Right.
And you got to go a long ways back. He traded for Eric Cole in 2015, right? Like he's done a lot of trades where he gets picked, but he traded away Tatar, right? He just doesn't make, a ton of picks or a ton of trades, right? Yeah. And if he does, their drafts, he develops a team. And that's what he's doing with the Oilers, right? He's changed this around. I mean, maybe, if you didn't have McDavid and you didn't have Draisaitl, he's the kind of GM you actually might want in your organization long term, right? For a little bit, right? Like to develop something like the Detroit Red Wings had, right? Mm-hmm. Develop. The problem is no fans are going to wait for that kind of development when you've got Draisaitl and McDavid, and let's add Nurse into that mix, right? Mm-hmm. And we're in our peak years, right? We should be, and we're not far away, but we should be top of the conference, right? Yeah. Every year after year. How much of this though? I'm particularly critical of Dave Tippett. Let's look at the season in review. Let's before we do that, because we talked about that, we both agree Duncan Keith worst thing. What were you going to ask me? You wanted to ask me something before. Do you remember, or is it maybe moot point now?
Are you kidding me? No, I don't remember. But what I would like to do also is give Holland a little bit of credit for saving JP. Because
100%. A development thing, right? This is exactly what he does.
That doesn't happen if Ken Holland doesn't come to the Oilers, or if Dave Tippett or whoever helped them out. But they deserve credit for that full. And now all of a sudden he's our third best forward. So
and that goes right into what I'm talking about, right? If you're talking about a development type of GM, Ken Holland's your guy, right?
Yeah.
You look at this team, is
certainly says all the right things.
Yeah, he does. And he's smart. He's shrewd. He's a smart guy. I just don't, I bring up Jim Rutherford because he's the first guy that comes to mind as a wheeler and dealer in this league. In fact, if I looked up Jim Rutherford.
Pete Chiarelli? Have you blacked out the last 5 years of your life, Michael?
Yeah. Well,
the guy traded Taylor Hall and Tyler Seguin, and you come up with Jim Rutherford as the biggest wheeler and dealer. Right, yeah. You must have hit your head a few times over Christmas and forgotten all about the last 5 years of the Oilers.
Right, you're 100% right. Yeah, no, Chiarelli is a. Yeah, I'm trying to black that out. It just keeps coming back. Yeah.
Push it back down deep inside. Deep down inside.
He makes things happen, though, right? What about Larson? How big was the loss of Larson to this team going into this season?
Yeah, if I was to get a redo, it's that or not signing Barry, and that's, you know, they're related to each other very much, because I think if we still had Larson and we're able to retain him, then I don't think we make that knee jerk reaction to sign Tyson Barry. Or if we didn't have to trade, you know, Ethan Bear, then maybe we don't sign Barry. But we had too many right-handed defensemen, and then all of a sudden not enough right-handed defensemen. So
yeah, if I had to guess, Tyson Barry was always going to be signed by this team.
Do you think so? Is that
yeah,
right?
I do. I mean, as much as I disagree with it, and I was kind of all right with it. Maybe not at the price, but I was all right with him coming back to this team as a power play specialist. But now, after seeing his body at work this season, I mean, and also, look, you got, you know, I've been critical of Tippett a lot. No more critical than him sitting Bouchard for a full season, and then, you know, like seeing Bouchard play this season, understanding like he's putting up good numbers, he's doing all the right things with the puck, he's been playing top line D for a good part of the season, and we're still not putting him on the power play. And the only reason is, and this is why Lucic's contract sucked, right, is because he's being played in the wrong spot, right? Because if you sign a guy for, you know, $6 million a season, you got to play him in a $6 million role. Well, if you sign a guy for $4.5 million a season, you gotta put him in a $4.5 million role, and that's not third line D, that's first line power play, right? Otherwise, you're an idiot, right? Or that's right. Like you're an idiot for signing him.
Listening to Connor McDavid again.
Maybe. I mean, how much of that is him? But you put
asked
Bouchard
when he was
up
16
there.
years old who would be his most ideal winger that he would want to play with when he came to the NHL, and he quite literally said Milan Lucic. So, you know, he wanted to play with him. He wanted Duncan Keith. He's the assistant GM. It's under his title. You didn't know?
Yeah, no, I know. Well, they said the same thing about Gretzky, right? I mean, good players do dictate a little bit. I mean, you can't, you know, I mean, if Gretzky said something, you better believe somebody heard it, right? Yeah. Like you know, I thought it was a little bit of clickbait, but the Athletic lured me in with a headline that said NHL's top player unhappy. I was like, oh no, damn Eastern media again, and it was about the NHL not playing in the Olympics. So I was sure they were going to try and spin that to an Oilers thing, but yeah. So no, I mean, yeah, if you're a team and you've got a guy like Connor McDavid, you sure as hell you better listen to him a little bit. He's got to leave everyday work happy, otherwise, you know, you get the Pronger thing again, and that's not good for anybody.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look at LeBron. Or look at Jack. Didn't the Buffalo Sabres Wikipedia page actually get changed to Jack Eichel as the GM for a while?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So, you know, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, we know how that one worked out, right? Yeah.
Got to keep your good players happy.
Dursa on Facebook again. Ken didn't need to take the full Keith contract. Something that is hard to stomach. Yeah, 100%. And he agrees with you. He's treaded water as a second pairing D. Damn. Yeah. It's like you and Dursa, the same guy.
Exactly. Like looking in a mirror.
It's like looking in a mirror. How's that for you, Dursa, if you're listening? All right. Okay. So we've got the we've talked about Keith, we've talked about Hyman. What happened to this team? Like what led up to this 6-game losing streak, and is it something to be concerned about? Like, you know, on the apocalyptic Oilers fan scale, where, you know, throw them all away, I'm tossing my jersey on the ice, to, you know, the, you know, I'm always happy Oilers fan scale that says, you know, Perlini's the best goal scorer we've ever had in the world. We're going to the Stanley Cup. 0 to 10, you know, 10 being Perlini, 0 being jersey on the ice. Like, what's that 6-game losing streak mean?
We're not as good as 9-1 start dictated. and we're not as bad as the 0-6 losing streak showed. I think a lot of things fell into our favor in the first 10 games. If you look at the first 5 or 6 opponents, they were all teams that did not make the playoffs last year. Then all of a sudden we did run into a couple or 2 or 3 playoff teams, and every one of them started their backup goalies. There was 3 games in a row where we started against backups. The power play was clicking. The third line was holding its own, and then it all stopped. Right. The goaltending, Koskinen made a formidable substitution for that stretch. And then all of it fell off at the same time. The goaltending got worse. The third line disappeared. The power play stopped clicking. And our defense got exposed. We couldn't score the first goal in 13 out of 16 games. And when all of that's happening all at once, that just leans to this other far side of the spectrum, right? So it's in the middle. We're not a wild card team. We're not a top 2 or 3 team. We're probably going to be right in that 4 or 5 slot or somewhere in there. And I think, the regular season will balance out to get us there again. And we'll probably have another 2 or 3 game losing streak. We'll probably have another 4 or 5 game winning streak. That's just how the season goes. It's just weird how this season started on such a roller coaster, like such highs and such lows.
So related or unrelated, is Anaheim for real? Like, is this team, we ask this question every year of some team, and some of them end up in that spot at the end of the year. And some don't, some drop off, but Anaheim's kind of interesting because much like Chicago, everybody was expecting them to make a turnaround and make the playoffs. If you had asked everybody who did the least and was going to pay the most, Anaheim came up. In fact, I'm probably on record somewhere on the podcast as saying Anaheim looks like shit this year and they're not going to do anything. But they're sitting here, sitting second in the Pacific right now, 40 points. Of course, they've got a few games in hand on Edmonton, so we can still catch them if you go point for point. But they're 6-1-3 in their last 10.
Yeah, I think they can hang in there, man. I don't know if they're as good as the Oilers. They shouldn't be, but Getzlav's still doing it. Zegras has taken a step up. I think Milano's taken a step up. Troy Terry has taken a huge step up. Troy Terry might be the biggest surprise in the
Troy
NHL.
Terry, yeah. It's unreal.
But what? He played Team USA. He played national development. He played in the World Juniors. Why, guy needs a chance, right? I love Raquel. I think they've got one of the top 3 to 4 goalies in the league, and their defensemen are pretty decent, like Lindholm and Fowler and Manson and Shattenkirk, and I'd take their top 4 over our top 4. I'd take their goalie over our goalie.
No, 100%. Goaltending's probably one of the biggest deals for us, right? Yeah. I think the big thing is, right, nobody knew what they were getting from Zegras.
Yeah.
And in fact, I had, prior to our first game against Anaheim, I had one of the Anaheim podcasts on the show. And they said, we're fighting for Wright this year, right? Like we're hoping we get Wright in the draft. At that time, they thought the same thing that I did, which was Anaheim wasn't going anywhere. We talked about Zegras. At that point in time when the Oilers played Anaheim, I don't even think Zegras had a point yet. Right, he had some flashes of brilliance. In fact, the game prior to them playing Edmonton, I watched that game just to kind of see what kind of team Anaheim was. And I looked at Zegras and I thought, holy shit, this kid can play, which we already knew. I mean, we all knew. We saw him play with Team USA. He's a talented player.
Would you rather have him than Broberg?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. In fact, he's got the attitude to be an NHLer.
Yeah, I think that's the coolest.
And Anaheim always expected something out of Milano, but it looks like Zegras is getting the best out of Milano, right? I mean, that goal clearly, one of the goals of the year, a nice goal, of course, recreated in the dub, or was it the OHL? Anyway, in the CHL, recreated.
Yeah.
So, obviously it's just, but somebody's got to get the creativity to do it first, and it was Zegras and Milano, right?
And he scored a goal that's going to be on highlight reels for a decade.
Yeah, in a rookie year.
And did you hear what he did with Ryan O'Reilly at the faceoff?
No, I did not.
Zegras he was telling the story when he was on Chicklets, but Zegras, because Ryan O'Reilly's top 3 in the NHL in faceoffs. Year after year after year after year, and Zegras was, I don't know, like 30% on the season so far. So before they dropped the puck, he said, "Hey O'Reilly, $100 on this draw." And O'Reilly didn't say a word, but the puck dropped, and Zegras beat him clean. Nice. And not another word was said about it. And Ryan O'Reilly sent him $100 after the game, so they had a big laugh about it. And then he tried it again with Draisaitl and against the Oilers, and Draisaitl told him to go fuck himself.
In true Draisaitl fashion.
Yeah.
I love that guy.
In German, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Anyway, obviously, so Anaheim, we didn't expect it. That puts kind of a bit of a kink in how we see this division. But when you put, I think Anaheim's for real. Look, as long as Zegras is doing what he's doing, Anaheim's for real. Getzlaf is a hell of a leader, and still a hell of a player, right? In fact, that Anaheim team, broken up, has won more cups than, right? I mean, that team was just, it had leaders on it, right? Like, love him or hate him, Corey Perry was a leader, right? And I hate the guy. Would I love to see him in an Oilers uniform? 100%, right? Patty Maroon, right? Like, that guy has won so many cups. It's right.
It's handcuffed to him.
Yeah, exactly, right. I mean, he can
cups like Taylor Hall wins draft lotteries.
Yeah, he can dent a cup and nobody even cares, right? Oh man, So the other surprise, of course, is Calgary, who I think has dropped off. They've lost, of course, 4 in a row. I did kind of an interesting thing today. I went and did a search by overtime points. Calgary's leading the conference in overtime losses.
Of course.
And who's on the top of no overtime losses? Of course, Edmonton, who hasn't wins games in regulation. That consolation points, a whole other story. We'll get into that. All right. We've burned off almost an hour already.
Time flies when you're having fun, buddy.
Yeah, you know what, it does. And we really haven't talked about a whole lot. I think, here, I mean, we've talked about sort of the best, the worst, which I think most Oilers fans would agree with both of those things. I don't think there's a lot of argument there. We've talked about the 6-game losing streak. Let's talk about goaltending. I mean, this is, look, I would be surprised if there's an Oilers fan out there that was 100% happy with the Mike Smith signing and not some type of a trade. Is the lack of goaltending on it, if you want to call it that, because some folks still agree or still think that Mike Smith is going to lead us down that path to a Stanley Cup. Not many people believe that, but there are people out there. Is the lack of goaltending perhaps more of a black mark on Ken Holland's record with this team than the Duncan Keith or maybe the trades, or, is that, if there's a legacy that he leaves, and if we don't win the Stanley Cup, if we win the Stanley Cup, it's all a race. Let's just put it out there, right?
Of course.
Yeah. And it would be, look, it's going to be a shame. The legacy in itself will be not winning a Stanley Cup, because you can't not have the best 2 players in the league and not win a Stanley Cup. You just can't. That is like the definition of not being successful, no. Right? But would that legacy include not being able to get it done in the goaltending department? And does he have options going into the second half of the year?
Oof. Two really good questions. The second one's probably harder than the first one. What's a bigger? Yeah,
March
I guess it
21st,
is, right?
by the way, is the trade deadline.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, goaltending wins you cups. Goaltending is a unique. There's only 2 goalies on your team. There's 7 defensemen, and having filled that with Markstrom, yeah, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. So, yeah, that probably is his biggest failure, and then also his potential biggest obstacle, or thing that he'll have to answer to if we don't end up winning a cup. The second part of your question, is there an answer? Man, it'd sure be nice if it's Skinner. Stuart Skinner at
It's
$1
not,
million
though.
or $1.5 million.
You can't, like, you can't.
No, it's not.
You
No,
can't
you're
believe
right.
that. It would be nice,
Well,
but it's not.
Okay, there's 2 schools of thought there. So, okay, let me answer your question first with the first school of thought. Okay, so we got to go out and get a goalie. Okay, great. I think everybody's in consensus, and that's fine. The second school of thought will be Skinner if I lose my train of thought. So, first train of thought, who are we? Okay, so we got to trade for somebody that's got some term. I don't know who that is. You can throw some names at me if you think there's somebody that's realistic.
Well, obviously the one everybody talks about is Fleury, right?
Sure. Okay, so we look at the bottom feeding teams. Okay, so if it's Fleury,
yeah, you got to look at those guys. Yeah,
I'm okay with that. If it's Arizona, I don't know who we get out of there. What are gonna some be at selling teams? I don't know if is Dubnyk gonna help us. I don't think so. If it's going to be in free agency after Koskinen's salary is erased, then, you're still looking at Fleury. He's a free agent at the end of the year. There's Darcy Kemper, Thomas Greiss, or Greiss, however you pronounce that. There's Halleck, Korpisalo, who we probably could have traded for, but I don't think he's any better than Koskinen. Corey Schneider's past it. Pavel Francouz isn't the guy. Holtby's not the guy. Jones isn't the guy. Jack Campbell. Well, Toronto's going to do everything to get him back. And now we're into some terrible goalies after that. Rittich, DeCasey. So Anton Forsberg.
Look, the answer has to be Skinner. I mean, you're 100%, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's either got to be Skinner. And so now you go to my second school of thought. Look at the goaltending that won Stanley Cups.
I don't want to because it makes me upset.
30 years,
you
can go back and look at the goaltenders that raised a Stanley Cup. 30 years. Go back and look. Two in that time period were either traded for or weren't a homegrown goalie. Of all the Crawfords, of all the Marc-Andre Fleury's, of all the Matt Murray's, of all the Jonathan Quicks, of all the guys that have won cups, you got to go back to, I think it's potentially Niemi and Patrick Waugh.
So you know why that is? Because good goalies get you there, right? From the start of the season. From the season, they get you there, and then they get you the whole way, right?
And you can't spend $9 to $10 million in free agency on a goalie and then expect to still win a Stanley Cup. So that's what scares me. So my second school of thought is Skinner. Well, I don't think he's the guy, but cheapers, I hope he is. And
there's a guy. It just doesn't mean this
answer.
Year. There's a guy that's a potential, and a guy that if you talk to, like, there's a lot of goalies that are watching him. It's out of Arizona. This Vizmelka guy.
Okay.
Yeah, like he's he's playing on the worst team in the league. Right, there's not much of anything there. He's holding on to a .902 save percentage. Yeah. On the Coyotes, if you're from Alberta. And he's an RFA next year.
I'd love to see him get in. Like, if we're talking about sellers, like, hopefully Detroit's a seller. He's got that relationship with Yzerman. Yzerman trades up to get Sebastian Cossa. Right after he grabbed himself Nedeljkovic, right? So I wouldn't mind Nedeljkovic. I wouldn't mind Cossa. if he could try to scoop one of those two guys, I'm
Yeah,
sure
we
he'd
had an
trade
option
Casa, but-
at Wallstat or Casa, right? Like we had, we could have went after either one. But obviously they believed or had some belief in Skinner. And Skinner, you know what? Skinner's done all right. You could, but look, he's not I just don't think he's the answer. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
I hope you're wrong too, and I hope I'm wrong too.
Yeah,
there's no doubt.
I just don't think he is. I don't think he's the guy, and it's too bad. But when you talk about that, the term of however many 30 years going back, Stanley Cup, and the other, obviously the reason why you don't trade for those goalies aren't available to trade for. Those guys, like they just they get available later on when they're Mike Smith's age, right? When they're Fleury's age, right? Like as they're in the back half of their careers, back third of their careers, where it's a little bit harder for them, and you need some really solid D or something else. And there's not a lot of Binningtons out there, right? Guys that come out of nowhere to win you a cup. It happens. It happens.
The Hamburglar.
That's like that's a strategy built on hope, right?
Yeah.
It's is a sad piece for this team. So if you had to pick something else beyond the Keith piece that was a bad news story for the Oilers, I think goaltending is one of them. Nobody's surprised that Mike Smith went down with an injury early. I mean, were you when you saw him that game go down? I mean, were you shocked? I mean, nobody was, right? The same thing happened last year, didn't it? He came back. He was strong. He came back. Yeah, but look, I don't know.
Smith was, between his age and his history, it had to come sooner or later, and he basically repeated exactly what he did last year.
Yeah, 100%. It's the same thing, and it's a sad state, and if the Oilers do make a trade at the deadline, which, to your point, the guy that's available, right? The guys that are available, the only guy that maybe has a shot at it is Fleury, and he's kind of got to want to be in Edmonton, right? I think he's got a no move, if I'm not mistaken. Right?
Might be a limited no move. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's modified, no trade. So he's got to put, he's got to decide that Edmonton is I think he'd probably give a list, right, of 10 or whatever is the modified.
To win a cup, I would say Edmonton's on that list.
Yeah. If he's looking to win a cup and he's all right going as a rental into the end of the season, he's a UFA next year.
Looking for goalies, yeah. So it's not like Winnipeg needs a goalie.
I mean, Chicago could easily take Koskinen, for the salary. I guess the biggest challenge is, Fleury's still $7 million. You got to fit him in the cap space.
Well, you'd have to give up your first round pick to have him retain salary. There's no way that happens without us giving up our first.
Yeah. And you're 100% right on that. And we know
then it's got to be Broberg or something like that. So we got to be willing to give up there. So.
Now, how scared are you with when you look back at Ken Holland's trade history? Like, do you think he's the guy that can get it done?
Well, after you read me that list earlier, I don't feel all that confident. No, I don't know. No. It's not ideal unless him and Yzerman can just kind of work out some sort of little backdoor deal where they scratch each other's back. But, I think that here, let's make an NHL trade and I'll help you and you help me. But I don't know, man. That seems pretty pie in the sky.
The biggest hope for this team, if you look at it, and of course, sky's the limit, right? I mean, McDavid and Draisaitl could put the team on their back. They could do it. If two guys could do it, those are the two guys that would do it. And if Nurse stays healthy, and he's had a history of staying healthy, his injury was, kind of an odd one, right? And and if he'd had that injury in the playoffs, there's no doubt he'd be out playing every night, right? Like that's not a type of injury that keeps you out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
And he's tough as nails, that guy. So those three, I wouldn't hesitate to bet on them, right? Like, I mean, it's they obviously they need more, but those are three guys that can win you a cup.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
Like, there's no team in this league that wouldn't want those three guys in their system.
Look what happens when Connor puts the team on his back. He walks on water. You know what I mean? Just to clarify something, Marc-Andre Fleury would have to submit a 10-team no trade list.
Yeah.
So he would have to put Edmonton on that list and say, I don't want to go there. Otherwise, there's 22 teams that he can be traded to. And the other thing was once Detroit traded up to take Casa, the Oilers were only left with either being able to take Wallstad or Burgo. There was no other goalie option available other than Wallstad for them. It was
the Oilers had an option. They could have traded up, found a way to trade up.
Sure.
They could have went after Casa. They could have done. They didn't. It was clear they didn't want to or care to, right?
Or couldn't get the same deal done that Detroit did.
Yeah. And when they didn't
Detroit had higher picks in the second to give up.
Yeah, fair enough. And when they didn't take Wallstedt, though, it was clear, right? I mean, there's a lot of folks that thought Wallstedt was the goalie that was going to go higher than Casa. In fact, everybody did. I think that I didn't see a list with Casa ahead of him.
I saw a few. I think like Craig Button and Low Tide. A lot of maybe more local media guys because they see him play for the Oil Kings.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's it was still, it was clear that the Oilers didn't. They weren't.
What says something when Steve Yzerman and Ken Holland probably have the deepest scouting roots in Sweden amongst any other GMs in the entire NHL, and both of them passed on him.
Yeah, 100%. Right.
That says something.
Yeah. All right. So we're just gonna put this on the take this down. We're gonna talk about we're gonna look forward to for the rest of the season, and then we're gonna finish it up. Because of the postponement of the Battle of Alberta game, which I think would have been an important game for Edmonton. I'm a little bit sad to see it postponed. They always come out playing hard against Calgary, and I do think whether Calgary Flames would rail at this, but I think Calgary's scared of McDavid, which any team should be. But I think particularly these guys, right? Like, they've seen him, breeze by Giordano for years and just do, unbelievable things to that team, and we love it. The rivalry, gets them going. Of course, it was a road trip, but the start of a road trip, but it didn't matter, right? Like, the Oilers seem to play them really well and get up to play that game. It's too bad that it's not there.
Yeah.
They're starting tomorrow night, St. Louis. Going St. Louis and then continuing on to the eastern seaboard, my neck of the woods. They're going to be in New Jersey. Pardon me. Then on the island, New York, and the Rangers, and then finish that off in Toronto. 5-game road trip before they come back home. The Islanders game, I mean, that it's an afternoon game, which whatever you care about afternoon games, it seems Oilers fans always get up in arms. I honestly I don't think the Oilers give a shit if it's an afternoon game or not. I think it just happens to be that luck of the draw. They haven't done well on afternoon games. Yeah. What do you think this road trip? Like, is this, how important is this road trip? You think they're going to come out and do really well? I mean, the Islanders, they haven't had a great season so far. New Jersey has not been great, I think, and I think Wedgwood is just coming back. New Jersey's not been great. St. Louis has been, they've been coming on as of late, but they've been, for the most part, they've been kind of a middling team this year, I'd say.
Yeah. Nothing
too fantastic. Is this good for them, bad for them? What's your thoughts going into this road trip?
I think each game gets increasingly more difficult for them as they go. They get a bit of a warm up, or work off the turkey game against New Jersey, and But then, the Islanders aren't an easy team to play against. Just, hasn't been a great record for them, but that's still a Barry Trotz coach team. And that's
it's a team a lot of people had going to the finals this year. Right?
I picked them in our pregame, or preseason show to go and win the cup. So, and I don't think they're past the point of return where they can't, to be honest. It's just the type of team that can, do that Binnington St. Louis type of grind in the second half to be able to get her done if they need to. And, I don't think the Oilers fare well against those types of teams with Clutterbucks and Martins, and where they're getting chopped and hacked and hit nonstop. So on a back-to-back, I don't think that game's going to be easy, just based on the Islanders' record. Then they step into the Rangers. Shesterkin's probably a top 3 to 5 goalie. The Rangers have been okay.
Unreal.
We already make every goalie look like
Vezina
the
candidate
coming of George Vezina. So quite honestly, what are we going to make Shesterkin look like? And then Toronto's good, man. We're going to come up against one of the best teams in the East there. So realistic dash is going to say 1-3.
1-3. Well, there's 5 games.
What, on the road trip? Aren't they back at home against the Islanders?
They play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. St. Louis, New Jersey, Islanders, Rangers,
I forgot about
Toronto.
the St. Louis game. My bad.
Yeah.
that's not great
I'm having some fun. I'm having some fun with you,
but
it's not a good game for them. Yeah.
I don't know. All right. 2-3.
2-3. I'm not even gonna give my.
Okay.
No. I'll go 3-2 on this. I'll go 3-2. The key game in this for me will be that final game of that road trip against Toronto. Yeah. Because that's a team they need. They need to get up for. That's a team they need to play against. That'll kind of show us what this team is made of. I think this is a playoff team, no matter what. They could come out of here 1-4. I think they're still going to make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Vancouver's killing it since their coaching change.
That's just
it is. Yeah, Boudreaux bum. But I'm going to go 3-2. I'm going to say they win the first 2. Win 2 of the first 3, and then they'll win either against the Rangers or Toronto. And that's that's the Oilers fan in me.
I'm taking the bookends. St. Louis
but the reality
Toronto,
to me is it's probably like if I look at that and if I was to do the pro line on it, I'd be 2-3. I'd be 2-3. I think they'll beat the Islanders, and I think they'll beat New Jersey.
I'll take the bookends. I say they win against the Blues, win against the Leafs, and they lose to all 3 New York teams.
Yeah, and that's all of those good. I mean they're. Hey, look, if they can get through that with a winning record this 5 games, that means a whole lot to them because they actually have the end of January is a nice little a lot of road games or a lot of home games. And they're sprinkled with some road games, and then they've got Montreal. They finish off the month with Montreal and Ottawa. Yeah. In fact, if they can go into January looking good, they could come out of January and move into February with where they're doing. Probably they're going to be playing, the Calgary game, the Anaheim game that they missed.
Yeah, without them going to the Olympics, they got a lot of space there to fill.
Yeah, and in fact, the fact that they're not going to the Olympics might play well for Edmonton.
I think so too, man.
It might be all right for Edmonton. Plus, Connor's not going to be there. Disappointing, very disappointing. All right, we've been well over an hour. We've got all sorts of no, not all sorts. We've got some spam on YouTube. I'm not going to click that link. Amber Lynn, as beautiful as you seem.
Wow.
Yeah.
Heavy hockey.
Heavy hockey, yeah. I'm going to, as always, I'm going to give you the last word tonight. But first, I just want to remind everybody tonight, as most nights, brought to you with the help of Bet99. You go to bet99.com, use Heavy Hockey, all one word, in the registration code, and you can get up to a $600 matching bonus. So that's better than you'll get on their site. Or go to heavyhockey.com, and there's a couple of banners for Bet99 on there. I'm working really hard to get GSP on the podcast. We'll see what happens.
I heard you had him booked right after Matthew Barnaby.
Oh, he's booked right after you. he's on right after this. I'm kicking you off. There's no way I'm letting you talk to GSP.
Just make sure I'm on for the Barnaby show. You won't be able to tell us two apart.
yeah, you're probably right. Speaking of heavy hockey, go to heavyhockey.com. Lots of great articles on there. I think even Dash, you're going to be getting an article up there soon enough. Hopefully. I know you had one before. Got rejected by the editor.
Like five articles, 5 rejections. But you know what?
Hey.
Just rub some dirt on it, pick yourself back up.
Walt Disney must have written 100 scripts before he made it. Yeah.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, Michael.
Exactly. Heavy hockey's like, it's a starting ground for a lot of great podcasters.
Competition's tough, man.
Yeah, it's tough.
No.
If you're on heavyhockey.com, you can also go up top. There's on the links, there's the YouTube link, or you can just go to youtube.com/heavyhockey and make sure you hit that subscribe button, which is in the bottom right. Or and hit like, maybe give us a comment. Thanks everybody for listening. It's been an interesting year so far. My last word is, I think that this is everything I expected from this team going into this season. Some highs and lows. I figured at some point, as much as I'd hoped as a fan it wouldn't happen, I figured something akin to this 6-game losing streak might happen. It was a little bit too easy to start. The one thing that worries me and troubles me the most, we didn't even talk about it, is the lack of production on the power play. In recent games.
Watch your mouth.
Yeah. But the fact that, they're not producing in recent games and they're still top in the league says something.
Yeah.
But we'll see. The other thing that worries me a lot is their starts. I'm hoping with Mike Smith returning to the lineup that's going to turn around. If we never see Koskinen in net again, look, I mean, he is probably the most disappointing 12-2 goaltender ever. When he was 12-2, and I'm still like not 100% confident in him. And I don't blame anything on Koskinen. Look, this team is still in a wild card spot with games in hand.
I bet it says something when you're 12-2, and you would get sent down to the minors and clear waivers. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
All right, the league shitty goals for 2 years, and
that's the way it happens. Thank you, Shirelli. All right. As always, I give my guests the last word. When you're done, say goodbye. Stay on until we get a chance to chat after. Man, we got some weird comments on the on the YouTube tonight. I tell you, everybody's out tonight. The whole crowd is out. Anyway, have a great night. And thanks again for joining. And last word's yours.
If you took time to send in comments or you took time to listen, thank you. Keep them coming. We do really appreciate it. Last show of the year. So let's start with the most important thing. Happy holidays, everybody. Merry Christmas belatedly and Happy New Year coming up. Be safe out there. Be smart out there. Oilers Nation, be calm. We're okay. Like Michael said, we're a playoff team, so we're gonna get there, whether it's up and down on the roller coaster or through the flatlands of Saskatchewan. But we'll get to the playoffs, and we'll just have to hold our breath once we get there to see how we do. As far as finishing off the year, I guess, you know what? You're either one of two people. You've either given way too many Christmas presents away and you're starting the year on the good side, or you've tipped the scales and you've not bought enough presents. And you need to even up the karma a little bit before the end of the year. So what we're going to need you to do is go to youtube.com/heavyhockey, even up your karma, and do us a favor. And for Christmas and New Year's, subscribe if you haven't already, please. Like you said, smash it, cross check it, give it a two-hander, spear it, elbow it, butt end it. I don't give a shit. Just hit that thing and we'll love you for it. Take care, everybody. Good night.